Hi Rima, hi Varun.
Hi Arjun. Hi Rima.
Good to see you both.
Hello, Arjun. Hello, Varun.
Hey.
All right, we are just going to wait and give people some time to join in, just a minute or two, and then let's kick it off. I think we are just in the middle of sending some reminders to people who have registered. We've had over 100 registrants for this workshop, so let's hope people can actually make it. At the same time, we'll be recording this and sharing this for people who can't attend, so that's always there. So just give me 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
All right, I'm sure more people will, be trickling in soon, and we can kick off. So, welcome everyone to today's workshop. We are going to be talking about changing careers in 2023. Now, before we dive into it, I mean, there's just so much to unpack. So, I want to take the chance just to introduce myself and Pivot, the company that I've founded, and also then talk a bit about Rima and Varun's background as well. So, yeah, I started Pivot in 2021, and the goal was to help people make smoother career transitions from one role or industry to another. So, what we have identified is that more and more people are not just job hopping from one company to another, but they are changing their profiles entirely, whether it's their domain, their industry, or sometimes geographies. I know at least three people in the room who have done that, myself included, and then Rima and Varun. And I'm sure there are plenty others who have either done it or are contemplating doing it on a very serious basis. So I wanted to take the chance and do this workshop for this year because I think the timing right now of making a career change is very unique and very interesting given everything that's happening in the job market. So, there's going to be a lot that we talk about in terms of understanding when's the right time to change careers and what all you can do to navigate a transition successfully. But yeah, I mean, that's about myself and the company. Now, Rima, I know that you have recently started your own career coaching practice, and Varun, you are an HR manager at Microsoft. Both of you have changed careers, so you have experience across different domains. But maybe we can start by sharing a bit about your background. So, Rima, it'd be great if you can share a bit about yourself.
Sure, Arjun. Thank you for having me, first of all, for this workshop. And career transition is a topic very close to my heart because I have done it not once, but twice. So people may not be aware. So, about my background, I'm a scientist who has worked with GE for almost 4 years, followed by working with CSR laboratories. And while I was doing my PhD, which I never wanted to. People always knew that Rima is the one who's never going to go for PhD. But under some circumstances, I had to do it. And while I was doing it, I knew I wouldn't continue once I'm finished but I didn't know what it would be once I'm finished. Okay. So it took me a while to understand what is it that I want to get into. So once I finished my PhD, I started working on my passion projects that I wanted to do over a period of time. And that is when this career coaching thing came up. And once I felt comfortable with it, I jumped into it and started my own career coaching community and the hub called Dynamic Professionals Hub in the year 2022, September. So since then, I have been doing this. Prior to that, I was also doing career coaching, but in a different format. So that is pretty much about me. Thank you, Arjun. Over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Shriman. That's helpful. Varun, maybe you can share a bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks for that, Rima. So yeah, I mean, I think I've had a few shifts myself in career, tried many times as well, which didn't work out. So multitude of things on that front. But I think I'm an engineer and I've done my MBA as well. Again, a classic question, right? If I have to do my MBA, why did I do my engineering? So that for me also was one of the first career switches. Which is to say, how do I kind of and why did I even get into that space? And I think that was one place where I started with. And then after my MBA, I joined Procter and Gamble, where I joined in business operations, and I was there for a few years. And then I made the switch to HR, which was where I found my passion actually while I was in the business operations side. And then after working there for about 4 to 5 years, again I wanted to switch to an industry which was really happening, and that was the tech industry. And then that's when I was fortunate enough to get into Microsoft, and that's when I've been here with Microsoft, right? So that's primarily been broadly some of the switches that I've kind of been fortunate enough to do.
Great. That's helpful, Varun. So, maybe you can dive into it. I think the way I want to set up today's session, because we have previously talked about changing careers, and a lot of people, I'm sure, can just look up YouTube videos and Google about how to change careers. So, the way we can add value today is really contextualize career change within what's happening in the job market today, right? And today's job market is just extremely volatile, as we all know. The companies which seemed so secure, profitable, and mature have been laying off people in thousands across the globe, right? Something that is completely unparalleled, unanticipated, right? So there are definitely a lot of people right now who are job seekers, but more than job seekers, they're also contemplating what's the right career move for them at this point, because they have been engineers, they have been product managers or marketers at these large companies, so they may not necessarily want to just go to another large company and do the same exact thing. So given everything that's happening in the market, in terms of layoffs, in terms of the new jobs coming up through AI and automation and all of that, um, just want to start at a very high level. How would you advise somebody in terms of exploring different career options that are available to them at this stage? What are some of the key steps people can do to take the time to understand what's the next move for themselves? Rima, maybe we can start with you.
Yes. So, career transitions are interesting. And I think we are in a very fascinating time where more and more career transitions are going to happen because people are more open to it. But at the same time, it's going to be challenging. And why it is challenging is because you need to figure out how you have to do it and when you have to do it, right? Now, how you have to do it and when you have to do it comes after, when you know why you want to do it. Okay. So if you are thinking of transitioning from your existing career to something different, then you have to first understand why. What is your why? Why do you want that career transition? Okay. So to illustrate you, say this is your two states. Okay. This is your current career state and this is your desired career state. Arjun, just wanted to check, am I visible? Right? Am I audible, visible? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so if this is your current career state and this is your desired career state, why do you want to make that transition? It's only because the perceived value of this desired state is much higher than your current state, right? And you would want to make this transition only when you understand the two pain points that you have. Okay. The first is your desired state, your current state. So, what is the pain point over here in your current state? Maybe you're not feeling fulfilled in your job. Okay. Or maybe you don't like the culture at your job, or maybe you want better work life balance. You want to spend more time with your family, or you want to take care of your parents, elder parents. Okay. Or it is that you lost job in recession, or it could be that you want to relocate entirely to a different place. The reasons could be ample for anybody. Okay. And those are your pain points. So once you identify this pain point, now you want to go to this desired state. Okay. Now, if you want to go to this desired state, just imagine that there is a ramp between these two, and that's very, very steep. Okay. Now, for you to cross this ramp to go to your desired state, it involves learning new skills, learning new methods to overcome your fears, learning to let go your self-doubt, learning to plan, being open to reiterate that plan if required. Okay, because you might fail many times. And so crossing this ramp is going to be super duper painful. Okay, so you have two pains, your current state and crossing this ramp. And if you don't know your why, or rather, I would say, if your why is not big enough, then your current pain point will not be big enough, because you will make this transition only when your current state is very painful. And you will find that making this transition will be much easier. Okay. So you will make that transition only then. So coming back to, you have to understand what is your why. Okay. And I did this with myself. So that is what I'm going to share, that how did I figure out my why? It was the regret minimization framework that I applied to myself many days. You know, it's by Jeff Bezos. When he was to make this transition, he asked himself, because he was in a good job and he wanted to get into this internet thing, that time the internet thing, and he wasn't sure what to do. Okay, so he used this regret minimization framework and he asked himself, if he was 80-year old, what would he regret? I'm repeating, if he was 80 years old, what would he regret? Would he regret trying for what he has conviction in and maybe failing? Or would he regret not trying? So go back and ask this question to yourself. What would you regret? And over a period of time, if you ask it every day, maybe, then you might get activated bit by bit to the extent that you might feel that I have to take this career transition. Mm-hmm. Okay. And at one point, you might feel that abhi to meko try karna hi hai, jo bhi ho jaye. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you have to understand your why. And when you get activated to that state, that is your when. Okay. Mm-hmm. So there's no age gap for this career transition. There's no age actually per se for this career transition to happen. Dhoni transitioned at 22 from from working at railways to a cricketer. And the Nykaa CEO, she transitioned her career at 50. She quit her job and became the CEO of Nykaa, right? Right. So you just have to understand your when. Yeah. And once you know your when, you will start working on the how. Got so it. The first layer is, yes. Yes.
Yeah. No, that, I think that's just, I think it's a very good point and a very good start to focus on your why that you have helped us identify here, Rima. I also think the way you explained it with the books in terms of the ramp, it was very visual and gave people hopefully an idea of what exactly they need to focus on when they are just considering career change at a very high level or very initial stage. Varun, just want to bring you into the conversation and get your thoughts on something similar. But again, maybe we can contextualize it again a little more within today's market, right? A lot of people are fearful about leaving a stable job or an opportunity because they feel like, there are so many companies which are laying off, so better to just stay put, not take any risks right now. Um, Now, is that something that people should take into account when they are contemplating a career change, how the job market is? Or would you advise that they focus on the things that, Rima has been talking about, which are more specific to you, what you want out of work, what you want out of careers, or perhaps something in between? Love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, see, I think couple of things, right? One is, if you're thinking of, what is the opportunity that you want to get to, I think as Rima said, you need to be clear on the why, right? And the why can also be either a challenge that you're facing currently, or it could also be an aspiration at the end of the day, right? So you could really have aspiration to anything. It could be, a certain role that you want to get into, or, a certain industry, or it could just be simple things like, more work-life balance and more money or anything on those lines, right? So once I think you're absolutely clear on why you want to kind of get to a certain place, then after that I think it's about evaluating the various options that you have at that point in time, right? I think like you said, the current market is dynamic, isn't it, in many ways. And
Yeah.
there there are, I think you'll have to make choiceful moves while you're doing that. While you're doing your assessment, you kind of see what is the role you get into. While you're talking to some of the peers, managers, you understand the industry, how they're hiring, why they're hiring. That'll give you, I think, a fair idea of what kind of stability. You understand the company, you kind of see how the growth would be, and then I think you would make your choices. So I think both are, I think, probably a little different. I mean, if you are clear on the why, I think when you make the switch that you want to make, I think it becomes that much more clear on how to make that change and which companies you want to get into, which roles you want to get into. Those are the ones that you'd probably kind of figure out. And honestly, I think this is the time when not many people are actually hiring, right? The hiring is fairly limited, at least in the tech industry. That's the situation. And if it's really a time to make a switch, I think this is the time for you to invest in understanding, building, getting the networks in, talking to people, etc., so that you have the complete understanding that when the opportunity comes in, it's that much more simpler for you to kind of make that switch, right? Because you have the levers on understanding the gap that Rima was talking about. You then are making the investment in bridging that gap at this moment, and then you're making the switch when it makes sense. I mean, and when the opportunity comes in, honestly, it's not like there's an opportunity and you get it in the first place. It does take time, especially if you're making a switch which is as big as switch in industry, switch in role. It does take time, right? Like I've had to spend at least year and a half to kind of make that switch between industries, and it took me about a couple of years actually moving from the business to HR, and I had to bridge that gap in terms of identifying projects that I have to do, proactively looking for people, building my networks, doing all what it takes to kind of build my own understanding and my own knowledge of what it takes to kind of get there, right? And there was some upskilling as well. So that's those are few things that come to my mind.
Yeah, I think one of the points that I really like what you mentioned, Varun, is that it's not just about the push factors, right? Which are actually negative, factors perhaps in your current work or your current careers. There could be some aspirations that you have that you want to pursue, maybe a dream career or a passion that you want to pursue, right? So I think both of those are valid reasons. You just have to understand which one is specific for you, and that will motivate you enough to get you to your next career. I think that makes a lot of sense. um, I think we have shared a lot of factors that can play a role in deciding whether a career change is right for you. I think the biggest hesitation or the biggest challenge that most people face once they understand whether a career transition is relevant for them is how to actually do it. And I think, Varun, you just shared a few things which are very pertinent to the steps you need to take for a career transition. Um, I think maybe we can delve a little deeper in that. So there are a lot of things you might need to do, which can take a little bit of time, and sometimes they can take an extended period of time as well, right? Like for example, upskilling, depending on what kind of skill gaps you have vis-a-vis your desired role, can take a lot of time. So, Rima, how should one start their journey of a transition once they have identified that that they want to make a career change? What are some of the key steps you would suggest that they take?
Okay, again, coming back to once you know your why, you know your when, it's the how part, right? Again, you have to start with your self awareness. So, what are your strengths? It might sound very cliche, but many people are not even aware of what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. It looks very superficial on the surface, but you need to dig deeper and understand some of the questions for your own self and answer them. Which is like, what are the three things like people can depend on you for, can count you on for totally? What are the three things that they cannot at all count you in for? Okay, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Once you know these things, then you map the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Now, when you're mapping the gap, there are three things that you have to see. What are your soft skills? What are your hard skills, which are functional or core skills? And what are your transferable skills? Okay. So, just to contextualize it, suppose you are a product manager, right? Now, your functional skills could be something like user experience design. You have to have that solid understanding of UX and UI. Okay. Then, project management is one of your core functional skills, right? Data analysis, right? So these are your core functional skills and your technical knowledge about the product, the backend thing that is happening while building the product, right? When it comes to your soft skills, it's your leadership, communication, empathy. All of that are your soft skills. Now, when it comes to your transferable skills, it's your strategic thinking, okay, that you had to use in your project management as a product manager. You can use that in the next role. It's your time management skills, right? Which you had to deliver a product on time, which is also relevant maybe to your next role. It's your decision making ability. Okay. So you have to list down all of those skills in terms of these three things: soft skills, hard skills, and transferable skills. And look, what is it in the new role? What are the skills that are missing? Okay, so go forward and check the job description, or go forward and check out the LinkedIn profile of other people, or research on people who are already there in that position. It could be somebody in within the company that you can talk to and find out what are the additional skills that might be missing, and then work on how can you build on these skills over time. Now you can build on these skills maybe by working voluntarily for some projects that you take for yourself because of your own interest in it. Okay. Or it could be something that you're working on part-time over weekends. Like that's what I have been doing when I was in job. I was taking training sessions while I was working. Okay. And otherwise you can do your own personal projects. Or I think this is one of the best assets available to us in today's day, is that you can start sharing your insights, your unique insights about the desired role that you want to shift to, the skills required. You can start speaking about it on LinkedIn. Maybe day one will be hard, but over time, if you connect with the right people, that will build your visibility. That will show people that you are aware and you are having some unique insights. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So these are some of the steps that people can get started on when it comes to the how part.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I think that's very helpful and very relevant steps. I think very actionable insight, something people can actually start implementing once they know that if the career change is right for them. So, Varun, I mean, you have made a transition yourself. You said it was a fairly protracted process, took you over 1 or 1.5 years to do that. Um, what were some of the key things that you really spent a lot of time on during that process? And let's say if you were to do it again, or if you were telling somebody else who was undertaking a transition, what are some of the key learnings you had from your own journey that you would say, perhaps don't do that or do this that I did not do?
Yeah, thanks. That's thanks for that. I think it's a couple of things, right? I think while it did take me that long, I know people who've kind of had it much quicker, right? Like there are people who wanted to, switch industries who've kind of done it in 2 months, right? So I'm going to take both the parallels. I think firstly, when I did switch from the business to HR, there were options that I could look outside of the company of P&G that I was working in. But really, honestly, when I did the stopgap arrangement, nobody would hire somebody who was directly from a business into HR, right? I quickly realized that. So when I realized that my goal was to get into HR, the one way is to move internally into HR, right? And that's the thing that I did realize. Now to move into HR also, I think I did realize that it wasn't an easy task. So it meant that I had to kind of look at ways to interact with the HR team, with the HR leadership team. So I looked at scalable projects that could be led in the business, which could help me, understand HR as well as give HR a view, HR leadership a view into who I am and how I work, etc. Right? I think that was one segue into how I did land that role in HR. And then when the opportunity came, I think it was easier for them to kind of put me into that role because they'd seen me and they've done that and they were willing to take a bet, right? So that was I think one that I think helped me, which is really to one build the network in terms of internally. I think many a times people start to think when I have to make a switch, it's only externally. I think that's the other piece that it may not be that easy, right? And the other important thing is that the why becomes all the more important because it may mean that you have to make short-term choices to achieve the goal, right? So it meant that there was a promotion that was upcoming if I was in the business, which I probably had to let go of if I had to get into HR, right? Which meant that I had to do that for longer. I think those are the things you should be willing to do, right? There was also a time when I made a different choice, right? And it was a choice where I was asked to move to a different location to a brilliant role in HR, right? And I had to deny that because location was a constraint for me, and it meant I have to do something for much longer than I would have liked to. So I think those are, I think, the choices that you also have to kind of be clear about while you're making that switch. Again, when I had to switch industries, I know of some of my peers. For example, if I had to move from the FMCG industry into the tech industry, which I wanted to move, I know of people who were in the tech industry, but because when an HR manager was being hired in the tech industry, there's so many people already in the tech industry who wanted to get in there, right? So as a hiring manager, I always saw somebody who was preferring somebody in the tech industry. It meant that I had to make that extra effort to kind of build my network in terms of understanding the role. What are the skill gaps that actually I see between the FMCG industry and tech industry? How can I understand scale? How can I demonstrate scale when I have those conversations? And that's what I was able to get through. Again, referrals played a huge part because I think while I was reaching out to people whom I didn't know as much, I think referrals was the piece that really is a breakthrough, right? That kind of helps you kind of get the seat on the table, because even getting an interview is difficult. I can tell you that I didn't clear many interviews. I went through multiple companies. I didn't do that because a lot of people were like, hey, you're from the business, you didn't have 8 years in HR, you spent 3 years. So there are a lot of things that people are looking at, right? But I think I kept at it, and I think that's the other piece, right? I think you have to keep at it. Again, it could also mean that you're moving at a similar compensation. Sometimes I had roles which I had to move at a slightly lower compensation. I was honestly okay with it, right? But I think if you're not okay with it, then I think you should be okay with it and chase those roles which are really there. But I think we should also be realistic about how we can land that and how long we want to wait for something like this. And when I did get the opportunity, I think it was again fortunate enough to have the right networks to kind of land the role. And honestly, I think this was interesting because when I spoke to the hiring manager in April, right, there was no role existing actually. The role came up much later in September or October. And that's when that hiring manager who already talked to me reached out to me herself and said that, there is this role, why don't you, come and interview with us? And then I went through the formal interviews. So I think those are things that help me, that when there is no role, I think that's when people also see that, hey, he's somebody who's passionate, he's somebody who really wants to get into. So they have more of a listening ear, they're willing to listen to you. And I think that honestly worked in my favor. What would I have done differently? Maybe if I was clear when I joined my MBA that I want to get into HR, I think that's the why I would have spent more time on. I think I would have done an MBA in HR, because the ones who landed a role in 2 months were the ones who had an HR degree from XLRI and not an operations MBA degree from SPJN, right? So I think that's the difference. I think if you're able to make that choices and understanding, you can do. But again, I think it's never say never. I think if you're lucky enough and you have the right networks and you're able to get through, it did take me a year and a half, but I think I was fortunate enough to kind of land where I wanted to get to. And it may not be the ideal role. Again, I didn't get into an HR BP role, HR business partnering role, which was something I wanted to. I spent 3.5 years in an HR consulting role, which was a transition role for me. A great role again, I enjoyed it. But now I'm in an HR BP role for about a year, and it's the role that I always wanted to do, right? So it probably can be a transition role that you probably need to pick in, find a foot in the door, and then you open the door when you have the opportunity to get in.
Hmm. Hmm. I think very
Arjun,
well.
may I
Yeah, go ahead,
interrupt and
Rima.
just add
Yes,
something?
yes, absolutely.
Varun, thank you for adding that networking bit, because you got all the opportunities through referrals. And that was precisely the case with me also. When I did my first transition, it was through referrals that I got from polymer science and technology. I was working as a scientist to a metallurgy industry, which are both not connected at all. Okay. And when I moved as a career transition coach, the first couple of assignments that I got, which was at IITs and my own company, General Electric, is when I reached out to people. So it was just random cold emailing without letting my mind think anything. Maybe no one would respond, letting my mind be on the seats and let me work. Okay. And I did that. And I got many rejections as well. But then you don't stop there. As Varun rightly shared, you never know when the opportunity comes up. And when I was talking about these painful parts, the RAM, these are things that come up in that RAM. You start assuming that it's not going to work out, but it will if you are persevering and you are connecting with people beyond your network, even if you are not knowing them, or even if you have not connected with them in a while. But if you're thinking for a career transition, it's time to activate your past connections as well, connect with new people. And the other thing Varun rightly pointed out is every time you don't have to look outside when there's a career transition. It can be within the company also. So is there a lateral move that you can consider?
Yeah.
So those are my 2 cents
Yeah,
addition to
no,
what Varun
absolutely. I
has said.
think out of a lot of points that Varun you shared, I would agree that those 2 points are extremely relevant and helpful. I personally, as a career transitioner, have utilized both of those things. Let's maybe stick with one point that you shared, and there are a lot of questions trickling in from our audience here, so I want to start taking those up as well soon. But networking. Let's just talk about that, because I think networking gets a very bad rap in the market, in terms of being able to actually get an ROI on it. Everybody talks about networking, but ultimately saying, yeah, okay, fine, I'll attend this Zoom session, I'll, attend a conference, but I don't know actually once I'm there, how to talk to strangers and then get either a job referral or some sort of an opportunity out of it. Right. So, and I mean, just from my experience, I've seen there are two kinds of networking, right? One is where you leverage your existing network, right? So you reach out to people who you already know, whether as friends, family, or your acquaintances. And then there is the harder side of networking, which is outside of your network, where you make new connections, right? So maybe, Varun, if you can just spend a little time diving deep, about how you would tell others to network, whether they are doing it within their existing network or whether they're trying to grow and expand the net.
Yeah, so I think that's a great one. I think. So I think a couple of things, right? One is that there is a negative connotation to networking many a times. A lot of people say, "Hey, I'm not comfortable in networking. That's something I don't do." But I think you should take a step back. I don't think you should start with networking with a goal in mind, saying I want to do the networking because I want to land a job. I think is just a dampener in many ways, right? I think you're networking for multiple reasons. One, you get to learn so much when you have those conversations. You're just reaching out to different people, wherein you're trying to understand what they're doing. You're trying to get better at what you're doing. I think when you go into that kind of a mindset, it eases things a lot, right? I think firstly that's the scenario. So today, for example, when I network with a lot of folks who are, whether they're within the business, whether they're sitting somewhere in in the US or in Europe or anywhere, I honestly don't have anything in mind, and I know for certain that I don't have an aspiration to move out of India, right? But I still have those conversations because I think it one gives me a great perspective, right? So I think firstly, I think go with networking with that kind of a mindset would be how I would think of it. Secondly, I think it's absolutely okay for you to not have a personality to reach out, right? I think that's a personality style. I think the question is, how do you then do it when you don't have it? Start with it, right? I think that's the first thing. Start with one, start with two, find people whom you're comfortable with, people whom you can talk just things who which don't matter to them, right? I think start with that. That will ease things, and then you move up, then you move across the board, then you move to different people. You can reach out to friends, go on to LinkedIn. If you, for example, if you want to talk to somebody in the tech industry and you don't, and nobody from the tech industry, right? Just type a name of a company that you're interested in or something. Look for common connections, reach out to them and say, hey, why don't you, put me in touch with somebody there. You'll be surprised of how you'll start to enjoy the conversation. At the end of the day, when you're creating a network, it has to work both ways, right? That both people have to like
Yeah.
talking to each other, and that's when it lasts. So, and
Yeah.
that won't be with too many, right? There will be a very few people. That's good enough. If you have those 3 or 4 or 5 people, I think that's good enough to give you that understanding, and then you can do. And that's where, honestly, this is not something that Arjun told me, but in a way I really like how Pivot does it, right? If you don't know how to do it, just talk to somebody on the Pivot network and you see people there, right? Just talk to them, and for all it may be something that works for you, and it may be something that you're getting used to, right? So I would say it's just a habit, and don't go in with a goal. Definitely, if you want a job opportunity, in the first conversation, if somebody asks me, for example, that, hey, I want a job, it's natural to be put off, right? To say, hey, I mean, they're coming in with something. So go
Yeah.
in, create that network, and then it becomes easier for you, right? Honestly, trust me, if people know you well enough, when there's an opportunity, they will reach out to you before you actually reach out to them, right? So I think
Yeah.
those are things I would probably think of when I think of how to build networks.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway for me from that, Varun, is that don't go into a networking environment thinking that you're going to land your job on the first your networking opportunity. You have to get there. You have to first build the network, invest in it, nourish it, and then ask for the right opportunities. And sometimes opportunities will come to you rather than you having to ask for them. And Eva, anything that you want to add to that?
What I would add is, especially if you are an introvert, the networking may be very intimidating to you, and you
Yeah.
already associate yourself with the fact that I can't do networking. And as Varun already mentioned, there's a negative connotation with networking attached for most people. They feel it's a dirty thing, okay? But it's not. So, especially if you are an introvert, how do you get started on networking? Maybe you can start by cold emailing. In case if reaching out on LinkedIn is too much for you, then maybe you can start cold emailing, and that's where you can start your networking. So again, just to rephrase what Varun has already told, networking is a skill. Okay, it doesn't happen in one day. It takes time, and you are here to network because you want to add value to people, and show them your attitude, your way of working, and having some fluid conversations wherein the person starts liking you, they start speaking to you. Okay, so networking is not a short-term game, it's a long-term game. Okay, and you are here to build relationships, and when people like us, trust us, they are willing to give us opportunities. So that's why networking plays a very pivotal role if you want to advance in your career. That's my addition.
Dimension that you added to this, Rima, about networking for people who are not comfortable doing it or who might be introverts. I think you can still retain your personality, your core traits, and still make new connections or leverage your existing ones. You don't have to consider it as an internal conflict or anything. There are ways to navigate networking as an introvert as well. There are a lot of questions here, as you can see in the chat section. So maybe we'll start taking some of them and then integrate the other topics that we were planning on covering as well. One of the first things, which relates to what we were talking about when we kicked off the session around how to understand whether a career transition is right for you. So we talked about understanding your why and all those things. This goes to the next level, and this is a question from Tanishq. So Tanishq is asking, if you know your why, but you are unable to pick one career from various options, how do you nail down, or how do you shortlist to that one thing? That's a very good question, and something that we come across at Pivot from time to time. A lot of people reach out to us where they have no idea, no clue what they want to do. They just know they don't want to do what they're doing currently. But then there are a lot of other folks who reach out and say, you know what, I've done some introspection. I know I'm good at these things, and based on that, I feel like I could be good at these three things. It could be, let's say, like product management, data analytics, and could be maybe digital marketing, right? But they're all very different. And how would you help me understand that which one is the best for me? So yeah, Varun, what do you think? Any specific to-dos or action items for people who are at this stage so that they can get more clarity on the right role for them?
Yeah, see, I think a couple of things that come to my mind when I think of this, right? One is, I think you should go down to your motivator level to be very clear on the why, and not just at a role level or at a job level, right? Because they at a role level, I mean, for example, you take a product manager in company A can be very different from product manager in company B, right? So I think you should go down to what it really means for you and whether that is the right thing for you to pick up, right? So go down to a motivator level, whether that means that you want to work on something specific that interests you, or is it something intrinsic, for example, which is could be around work life effectiveness, anything, right? So what are those things? I think you should first figure that out. That will help you get or shortlist around what makes sense for you. Two, I think it will keep changing as you work, right? I mean, how you feel 5 years earlier would not be the same probably how you feel today, right? And as you navigate through your life stages also, that may keep changing. So be comfortable with that that's something that will keep changing. It's an exercise that you'll have to kind of probably keep doing as you're moving across. And if you feel differently, I think that's the one thing that you should also kind of think about. The last piece around this would be that if you're still unclear on, you have 3-4 options that you're there, go ahead and take it. I mean, nothing, I mean, at the max, it's something that it will not work for you, right? But I think before you jump in, make sure you are completely understanding what that role is, what that means in that organization. And the way to do that is by talking to people in that organization already, right? Talking to peers in that organization, talking to people who are doing those roles, because you may have a perceived understanding of a certain experience which may not be the actual case, right? So go there, be absolutely sure. So if you're able to spend that time, I think many a times I've seen people say, hey, I think this is a job that will get me what I want to, and then they land and then say, oh, but this is not what I realized it is, right? So try to invest and do that before you get that opportunity. Ask those questions in the interviews. It will give you a great understanding of the role, what it is, etc. And then when you think that it is something that you want to do, then jump in, dive in, right? I can understand the fact that you may not have as much clarity to say this is pinpoint on the one thing, but I think once you evolve your own thinking and how you want to kind of get to your own levers, I think it will help you from that perspective.
Got it. Got it. I think that was clear enough. Rima, I wanted to take up another question with you, if that's okay. We have a question from, I believe, Harry. So Harry is in the military right now, and he's leaving service next year. Again, he has a very strong why, so he understands, the reasons or the motivations for his transition, but he's struggling with the how, and I think he's making a switch to finance. I think if I was to boil down what he has shared is basically that he's thinking about making a fairly aspirational kind of a transition. So he's switching from military to finance. At the same time, he's thinking about changing geographies, right? Going, I believe, from India to Europe. The main question is that too ambitious? Should I be doing both of these changes together? Or is there a way to de-risk my transition and make it more achievable? So what would be your thoughts on that?
Yes, Arjun. So it's actually depending on what kind of personality you are. If you ask me, I'm a person who would pivot a little bit, and I'll make you understand what that exactly is. So say your career trajectory is this way right now, okay, and you just pivot by 10 degrees. So over a period of 2 to 3 years, it will go somewhere there. The trajectory shifts, okay. So when you are doing that career change, if you all of a sudden pivot like this 90-degree, you will feel like a frying fish on the pan, okay, because you are putting up so much pressure on yourself, and you will feel so overwhelmed because there is so much that you have to cope up with. Are you that kind of personality? Can you cope up with so much at all at the same time? Then I would say then go ahead. But if you're not that kind of personality, then you have to pivot by a little bit of, you have to shift a little bit from your current trajectory. So if you're wanting to move into finance at the same time to a new country, you have to think about parameters like in the new country, you might have lesser connections than you have already in your country right now. And why would people want to trust you in the new country? Okay. And if you're pivoting to finance, then break it down into steps. You cannot just jump into something. So it's the micro steps that is going to lead you to your macro goal. That has always been the way to do it. Okay. So you cannot be impatient with the results that you want, but you have to be really patient with the result that you want, but you have to be impatient with the micro steps that you make and take actions. Okay.
Mhm.
You have to be impatient. Sorry, you have to be impatient with that steps that you take. You have to keep taking actions once you break it down into micro steps. And that's how you pivot. Now, if you're someone who can handle so much of uncertainty and overwhelm once you're moving to finance from altogether a different background and to a new country, I would say go ahead. But
Yeah.
my uh, decision would be, if I were at your place, I would pivot by certain degrees and gradually.
Yeah, I think well put. What we often tell people is that it's always better to make two smaller pivots rather than one larger pivot. If you're looking at it from a practicality standpoint, if you actually want to achieve your goal, right? A lot of people have very ambitious goals, and it's good to be ambitious, but at the same time, you have to understand what is ultimately possible, right? So there are plenty of factors that we have discussed which go into whether you're going to be successful at your transition. Some of them have to do with your internal motivation, discipline to be consistent, like you said, Rima, in terms of consistency of those micro steps that you're executing on a daily or weekly basis. But then there are factors outside of you, right? The employer's perspectives on who they want to hire. And if you're changing geographies, then I mean, that's a huge factor because you don't understand the regional norms of job markets and other things. So I hope this does not discourage you, Harry, but I think what we are trying to focus on here is help you make the transition in a de-risked way and in a way that you actually get to your end goal, even if it takes slightly longer than you might anticipate. Um, I think,
Arjun, just interrupting you, maybe Harry, you can look for someone in your community or that you know of who has made that kind of pivot, and maybe you can reach out to them and ask how did they do that.
yeah, and that's a good one, Rima. I think very good advice. Harry, I don't want to talk about Pivot too much, but we do have a network of industry mentors. We, in fact, have worked with other military veterans as well who have made the transition to corporate. Some of them have gone into supply chain operations, others have gone into strategy and finance roles. So feel free to reach out to us or check out Pivot later and see if you would want to speak with somebody who's made a similar transition. That said, I want to take up the question here from Sneha, which is something, I think this is on every career transitioner's mind, every single career transitioner's mind that I have met, which is how can I make a career transition without getting hit on my compensation? Because I'm going to be starting all over again, right? And I think there is a couple of things that we have understood about how people's finances get impacted when they are making a career transition. But Varun, you've made this transition. You've probably seen others as well, going through this transition. What is your advice, or what is your key learning here in terms of navigating your finances when you're going through a transition?
Yeah, see, I think one, it does come down to, what are your motivators and how strong are they, right? So if you're absolutely clear that you want to make that industry switch, for example, then that is a goal for you that is there, right? It may mean that you may have to compromise on some of the other pieces that are there, right? And one of the pieces could also be compensation, right? Or you actually narrow down and say that, hey, here are those, few companies that I'm aware of that will give me the compensation that I kind of desire. Honestly, for me, I can give you my own example, right? And I'm talking of this. I was somebody who wanted to compromise on my compensation as well, right? I mean, because I was so clear that I wanted to get there. But the number of companies who were actually offering me my current compensation was very few. So one of the reasons I won't get shortlisted also was that, right? The question you're asking is a little different, that you don't want that to happen. The thing that will happen is it will narrow down the choices that you have, which is also okay, right? You may have those 2 or 3 companies that you want to kind of look at, which are offering the compensation that you desire. I think that's when you kind of look for opportunities within those companies, see what it takes for you to get there, and also be realistic many a times, right? I have seen people, for example, who were chasing things which were really not realistic, right? I mean, they were chasing, saying that, hey, I don't want to take a hit, at the same time I want to go for my current compensation. As a hiring manager, if I have two options, as somebody who's coming from a similar industry, who's well experienced, who's done this before, versus somebody who's showing the promise but doesn't have the experience, I've seen people pivot more towards the one who has the experience, relevance, etc., all of that, right? So it may mean that you may have to make short-term, choices, but I think it's something that you can think of as you're, making this, right? So I think be realistic and look at what works for you, and then see how that is something that you want to kind of move forward, right? There are also many ways you can navigate this. Different companies have different compensation structures, right? For example, not every company may be willing to pay you a base pay that is similar as what you are today. But your total comp, for example, they may offer you a joining bonus, they may offer you a stock option that may work for you. So also look at some of those pivots that you can leverage on, right? I think if there are companies that you may want a certain take home, for example, every time, and that's why you're saying, this is my base pay that I want. But if you were to look at a slightly medium term view, maybe a joining bonus which you will get if you're staying with the company for a year or two, or maybe a stock that will get vested over a period of time of 3 years, maybe a good bundling option for the company to look at, giving you an opportunity for a certain role, right? So also look at compensation not just in terms of my current take home versus what I'm getting there, but look at it in terms of overall compensation, and how that may help as well.
Different nuances to this specific point, right? One of the key things that we generally think about, how to consider your compensation when you're changing careers. It's not a just the first year or 2 years or even 3 years that you have to think about, right? From a compensation standpoint, you have to think about the long term. So if you are sometimes, let's say, stuck in a role which is not leading you to growth opportunities in terms of your responsibilities or your pay package, then perhaps even if you take a cut for the first year or two, it might work out in your benefit, because over the long term, your pay might rise much faster than your current role. So I think, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just want to quickly move on to the next question. We have a lot more coming in. There's one from Anshda, again, a very, very pointed and relevant question. And Reema, I would like your thoughts on this. Basically, Anshda's point is that she has done upskilling and she believes she has the right skill set for her desired role. The problem that she's facing is that companies are only looking for experienced candidates, even when they're looking for or they're posting fresher jobs, right? So that is something that we have also seen. A lot of times companies have outsized expectations or at least what they post in the job descriptions seems like a big challenge compared to what what the candidates might actually have in terms of their skills or their knowledge. So how do you navigate such a gap where you believe you have the right skill set because you've taken the courses, etc., but companies are looking for actual experience in the field?
Right. So, taking courses and getting certifications doesn't directly imply that you can apply that really well. Okay. And that is what companies are looking for. Can you apply what you have learned? Okay. So, uh, what have you done when it comes to the application part? I understand you don't have any relevant experience, but can you build it through internships? Can you go for unpaid internships also? Because if I were at your place, for me, getting into the industry was my strong why, would be my strong why. And for that, I can do anything. Okay. It might take a little bit of time. Maybe I'll have to work. Most of the companies nowadays, the good companies offer paid internships, but I'm saying the worst case scenario. Okay. So try to get an internship. If paid, that's very good. If not paid, then also I would suggest that it will give you some experience. That's number one. Number two, try to work on some personal projects, build some personal projects. Okay. There is a whole internet available. Go and research what are the problems in those areas of work and try to make a project based on that and build a portfolio. Okay. That again makes you stand out from the other candidates who are in the similar position. Okay. And even if the job description, this is one more thing people struggle with, they look forward for 100% match on the job description. That never happens. I had shared it in a couple of days back in one of my LinkedIn posts that those are unicorn candidates. Okay. So even if it's matching 50%, 60%, you apply, you have nothing to lose. At the max, you will not get a call, but you have nothing to lose. Okay. And if you're doing these steps over a period of time, you are bound to get results. It might take a little bit of time, but as I said earlier, be patient with the results, but be impatient with your actions. So to sum it up, look for internships continuously, build connections through LinkedIn or email, try connecting with people, look for internships and build your portfolio. If you're doing this every day, maybe you're connecting just to 10 people every day, okay, not looking for a job, but building that relationships and taking the conversation forward, you're bound to get somewhere in the next 6 months. I can guarantee you that.
And the portfolio part, absolutely. There might be other things that you could also do in addition to that. You could sometimes even just volunteer for free
One
with
addition.
early stage startups. Sorry, Varun, were you saying something? I think, Varun, you're cutting in and out a little bit. Um, Perhaps it's your internet connectivity.
Oh,
But
is
anyways,
it? Oh, okay.
I was just going
Is it
to
is it
wrap
better
that
now?
one up. Yeah, it's better, but I think there's still a little bit of an issue at your end, Varun. I think it says your network bandwidth is a
Okay.
little low.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, you could also, Anshudha, work with startups literally just as a volunteer, so like a lot of startups initially at early stage or they don't have big teams, especially for non-core functions, right? So if you are working in a non-core function, especially or sometimes even a core, they can use a helping hand. You can just reach out to the founders even directly at startups and say, these are the skills I have and I would love to volunteer and contribute in this area just for a month or two. And if you like my work, then perhaps we can talk about a full-time role or an internship or something along those lines. But I think, Rima, your points were very spot on, and I hope that was helpful, Anshita.
One addition, Arjun. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Okay, so one addition, because I think those are great points about looking for internship, looking for projects that you can showcase, your experience, etc. But again, I think it may also not work after doing all of this as well, right? I think one other way that you can also think of is that you can find like if you know that you want for which you've already upskilled, maybe in the same company look for a role which suits your skill currently and move into that role and then move on. You can also look for additional opportunities in terms of the role that you desire, right? And then you can get into that role. So that can also be one way to find an entry into the door, because I think just getting that entry is very difficult, right? So I can understand when the question was put in terms of how do I get in, but you can just move a temporary role and then get to the desired role in that same company when you want to make that switch.
And you had brought this up earlier as well, Varun. So I think this is something that can actually de-risk transitions quite a bit, make them more achievable. Um, we have one or two other questions. I know we are almost coming up on our time. So Rima, Varun, would it be okay if we spend just maybe 2, 3 extra minutes, take these questions?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sure.
So one is from, I believe here, it's from Radhika, and Radhika has a question for Rima. So Rima, I think you can see the question as well in the chat section. Basically, Radhika is pursuing inorganic chemistry, and she is wondering whether it would be better to get an industrial PhD or stay in academia, because people in academia are generally struggling with grants. So this is I think it's a very specific, unique question which is directly applicable to Radhika. Um, what are your thoughts, Rima, given your science and tech background?
Yes. So, Radhika, that's a very pertinent question. And you have rightly pointed out that the scope in academia is actually very limited. Most people after doing PhD, everybody wants to get as a faculty in the best of institutes, which are IITs or NITs, but the scope is really, really limited. While if you can get an industrial PhD, now me being a person from industry, having worked in GE and also done my PhD in an industry-oriented laboratory, what I could say is that the work is very fast-paced and you get exposure to lots of instruments and access to instruments very easily, which may not have in an academic PhD. Okay, and also the mentors that you might have in an industrial PhD are much more accountable. Okay, because at the end of the day, people working in the industry have to get some results, but in the government organizations, that accountability is much lower. So your PhD may not progress at a pace. Of course, it depends on you, but certain things depends on your mentors and it may not progress at the pace that you want it to. Okay, so if you want to finish it in 5 years, as I read, is it good to pursue a 5-year PhD in India or try to join outside into a 3-year? Now, that's also a very not a straightforward answer to that, even if you do a 3-year PhD outside. So what mostly happens is the problem in that case is mostly defined. It's happens mostly in Europe. And so when you go out there and do your PhD, you can just start working on the problem and get it done in 3 years. And maybe then you can do postdoc and get into an industry position. But the journey for every PhD is very different. It depends, again, it comes back again to the 3 years or the 5 years that you're spending on your PhD. In addition, what skills are you developing? Okay, because once you walk into the industry, what you will be doing in the industry will be absolutely different from what you have done in your PhD. There will be no connection. So you have to be open to take that project up with the belief that you can do it. Okay, so a 3 years PhD outside is good. A 5 years PhD in India is also good. There are pros and cons of both the things, but any day I would prefer an industrial PhD versus an academic PhD. Radhika, I hope that answers your question.
Just move on to this one final question here from Sirisha, and this one is for Varun. Varun, I think similar kind of transition that you have made seems like what Sirisha might be also contemplating in terms of switching from FMCG to tech. What are some of the key skills or learning that would help people kickstart their HR career in today's age? So, what are some of the core knowledge and skill sets that you would recommend that people focus on when they're thinking about starting their career in HR, especially in tech industry?
Sure. So I think one difference, a couple of differences that I can see between the tech industry and FMCG industries. One, the tech industry is much more fast paced, right? So the kind of changes that you will go through will be significantly faster. Maybe a month or two, you'll see a complete switch. So that's one thing that you can kind of leverage on, which is org change management. I think those are things that are skills that will become very critical in the tech industry. Second thing is around scale, right? I think in tech you have a lot more scale. So your ability to handle scale, ability to demonstrate impact as you're looking at a larger scale is something that will become very important. So these are skills I think that will be crucial. Again, while those are broad based things, it becomes nuanced when you look at what part of HR that you want to look at. So whether you are doing HR business partnering, whether you're doing uh, talent acquisition, whether you're talking about compensation and benefits. I think when you think of each of them, I think what is expected of you, will keep changing. Honestly, the core skills still remain the same, right? Because there is people management, there is how do you build the right culture, all of that remains pretty much similar. But if you can look at which role type that you're interested in, which kind of role, and then see what it makes sense. So for example, if you're looking at growing your career in compensation, then I think the way compensation structures work in FMCG industry is very different from how they work in the tech industry, right? So I think for example, tech industry, you have a lot of stock based options, etc. In FMCG industries, the increments are different. So I think having that knowledge and understanding of that industry becomes all the more critical, which you may not need when you're thinking of, let's say, an HR business partner role, right? You may not need to have that depth of knowledge, while you really need to focus more on change management, which you may not need when you're thinking of a compensation role, right? So also be clear on which kind of role you want to get into, and then kind of understand what are some of the differences. The best way to do this is to understand firstly the different role types in HR, and then see what you want to do, and then say that if this is a role type that you wanted to reach out to people in that particular role, and then try and understand what are some of the key things or trends in that particular role that you can learn about, which will then give you an understanding of that bridge that Rima kept talking about, right? And that will help you understand whether it is a course that you have to do, whether it is industry understanding that you have to do, whether it is just upskilling yourself with actually a completely new degree that's needed, because your current degree may not be something that may be relevant for the company that you're looking at, etc. So it could be any of those. So that understanding can help you on that.
Super helpful. I think with that, we are coming up to the end of this session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I hope all the experiences and insights that Rima and Varun shared were helpful. I have provided links for both Rima and Varun's profile in the chat section in case you want to reach out to them, connect with them, and discuss your career transitions, get one-on-one feedback. They both have done it themselves. I'm 100% sure they can provide valuable feedback to you. Apart from that, I will also just quickly share the link for our platform, which is Pivot. Again, we solely focus on helping people make career transitions. To do check out, and in case you are looking for end-to-end support on your planning and execution of career transition, feel free to reach out to us. Yeah, with that, I think we are coming to a close. So thanks again, Rima and Varun, so much for joining me today. I think it was a great session and something that probably added a lot of value in people's lives in terms of whoever joined us today. We will record this and share it with everybody. So feel free to share it amongst your network and your friends. But yeah, any final thoughts, Rima, Varun, that you want to share before we wrap up? Rima?
Yes. So, what I would like to share is if you're undergoing a career transition in today's day and age when it's so volatile and there's so many options out there and everything feels like, the gold is glittering, it'll work out for me, and you're feeling confused and all of that, try to get support of people who have already done it. That gives a lot of clarity. Don't do it by your own self. If you can do it, that's great, nothing better. But if you can't, You can always do it with the support of other people. So reach out to people who have done it.
Do a solo struggle is what we like to say. Solo struggles are very hard to navigate because it's all on you. So great message, Rima. Varun, any thoughts?
No, I think career switches are not easy. I think they first, I think, acknowledge that, and it will take perseverance. So be at it, and we've talked of a number of things, and if you're just uncomfortable talking to somebody, I'm happy. You can reach out to me, or I'm sure anybody out here. So we'll create that comfort, and you can reach out. So I wish you the very best, folks, as you're getting to achieve what you want to. Thank you, Arjun and Rima, for this.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining, everybody. And Varun, that was a great wrap up. So I think we will now wrap this up and reach out in case you need any help on your career transition. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Good night.
Thank you.